Hello everybody and welcome back to Typical City. Rodri, the cover, the replacement. What are we going to do, Blues? It's a big transfer saga for Manchester City. And is it even a saga anymore, or have Manchester City already made up their minds? And we're not going to get cover or a replacement for Rodri. Should we need a replacement for Rodri if, God forbid, he got injured or suspended again? Like we saw last season, we all know the importance of Rodri now. And this video is very much going to be reiterating what I believe most of you are already well aware of, but looking at the options as well, the possible options that are out there that Manchester City could purchase, as well as looking at the options that are internal, what we already have at our disposal, players, and trusting the process is something that is a common phrase that gets used in football. We are, from clubs as well, that really shouldn't be trusting the process, because the process has been pretty piss poor from some football clubs. But our football club, Manchester City, the process has been pretty good, pretty successful. We've seen a lot of success through trusting Pep Gaurdiola, and I know there were so many City fans last season that turned their backs on Manchester City with 10 games to go, saying that's it, Premier League title's done. Decisions were poor in the transfer market. They're still saying things this season that we got away with it, and that we just about clawed our way over the line. We went toe to toe with Arsenal. We didn't claw our way over the line. We punched our way over the line. We battered our way over the line on a winning streak that was unbelievable in the Premier League. We were one penalty shootout away from knocking out the eventual winners of the Champions League. We would have had to have beaten Bayern Munich in the semi-final. I have every belief that Bayern Munich side last season, we would have beaten them and then would have beaten Borussia Dortmund in the final. I believe that we got knocked out and we would have won had we not been knocked out. We got to the FA Cup final. And again, a poor performance from Manchester City. Nothing to do with transfers or anything like that. City just didn't turn up on the day, and United wanted it more, which is a real shame. That phrase hurts more than anything. But truthfully, thinking about how well we did last season, I don't think we did claw ourselves over the line. Now, I'm also not a moron. I'm also not an idiot, and realise that we have a serious over-dependency on the likes of Rodri. He's a key figure, but he would be no matter where he goes. It's not a Manchester City problem, it's a Rodri problem. And now with what he did in the Euros as well, this is a problem for another day, but I mean, Rodri's tied down till 2027, so we've got 3 more years of Rodri in a Manchester City contract. So the likes of Florentino Perez, Real Madrid owner, wants to come knocking at Manchester City's door. Certainly in the next 2 years, you're looking at 150 million plus, and I'd say at least for Rodri. You're getting close to 200 million for a player of Rodri's quality, but playing in defensive midfield, you tend not to command as big a price compared to the forwards, but still, he's lined up. He's now the favourite for the Ballon D'Or as well, which for me, I mean, that's typical Real Madrid, isn't it? As soon as you go into the Ballon d'Or winning or nominees, you're on Real Madrid's radar at that point. Now, Carvajal's made his comments. I personally believe he's going to see out his contract at least, and I like to think Rodri's going to extend. But going into next season, there are options out there. The 2 most obvious for me are Bruno Gimes and Joshua Kimi. Bruno Gimes' release clause, that's passed now. That passed weeks ago, which was at £100 million. City were never going to pay that anyway. So the fact that release clause has now gone, I don't think City were ever backed into a corner to the point where it was, if needs be, we'll spend that 100 million. I don't think City were ever going to spend that 100 million. Now that the release clause has passed, all that's changed is Newcastle's power and control over the situation has gone up, and City's stance has stayed exactly the same as it was before. We were never going to pay 100 million. So now we may offer something closer to 80 million for Bruno Gimes. And I just don't think Newcastle are going to do that deal. I think this is a business side of things. We've already heard Joel Linton, his Brazilian camaraderie, saying he ain't going anywhere. He sounds like he's staying at Newcastle. Put yourself in Newcastle's position. When City were taken over, when we first established ourselves as one of the big boys in the Premier League with money to spend and a real goal to aim for, a target for Manchester City to go for, is becoming Premier League champions. We weren't selling our best players at any point. At any point did we go like, we've got this absolute worldie of a player, quality defensive midfielder, let's say for example Gareth Barry, who is one of the most underrated Premier League players of all time for me. No one ever mentions his name in defensive midfield, but what a superstar he was for Manchester City. If someone came in for, I mean back in then it would have been closer to 50, 60 million for someone like Gareth Barry, we wouldn't have sold him to nobody. He would have had to have handed in a transfer request for that move to have gone through. Bruno Gimes has got too much respect for the Newcastle fans. He isn't going to force a move through. City are not asking him to force a move through because of the respect between mutual parties there. The deal doesn't look like it's going to happen for me. I just can't see it happening. Unless suddenly Newcastle decide to be very generous and allow us to buy Bruno Gimes for 80 million, they're not going to do that. Or City pay over 100 million for Bruno Gimes and we make ourselves look like fools when 2 or 3 weeks ago we could have got him for 100 million. Again, not going to happen. The next player for me is Joshua Kimmich. More realistic. Way more realistic. And again, you're dealing with Bayern Munich. That comes with its own set of problems because Manchester City and Bayern Munich have not got the best relationship when it comes to transfers. A little bit of history between the two clubs with the original 115 and the Rui Pinto being linked to Bayern Munich and a lot of the De Spiegler, all of that stuff. The history between the two clubs is not great. So the idea of doing business with Bayern is not easy for Manchester City. It may be easier considering the fact that Joshua Kimmich has got 1 year left on his contract compared to Bruno Gimes, whose contract ends in 2028. So he's got a longer contract than Rodri. Again, going back to Bruno Gimes, do you think if you were Newcastle, do you think you'd sell? If we were to get an offer for Rodri for 80 million or 100 million, do you think we'd sell? No, we would say he's got a contract until 2027. Just like Newcastle is saying, he's got a contract. Bruno Gimes has got a contract until 2028. So the ball's very much in their court with Newcastle. So that's why I feel like that deal's going to be near impossible for Manchester City to get done. Maybe further down the line, unless the player starts to angle for a move, he's not going to do it. Kimmich. He's very much a big fan of Pep Guardiola, vice versa. Pep Guardiola is very much a big fan of Joshua Kimmich. He wants to play in the Premier League. He wants a new, fresh challenge, having been in the Bundesliga for the majority of his career. He now wants to have a new challenge, and the Premier League very much fits the bill for that. And playing with Pep Guardiola in a Manchester City side, it all works out for me. The fact that he's got a market value of around 50 million euros, I think City could get it closer to 30, maybe 40 million, considering the length of his contract. It runs out in 1 year, which means City could play the patience game, and we've done this before. And wait a year and get Joshua Kimmich on a free next year. Problem with that is age. Joshua Kimmich by that point will be touching 30. 30, I mean, in defensive midfield, you can get away with it a little bit more, but still, free. Again, you're, as a fan, me included, where we're like, who cares what we pay? I just want to see the best players playing for my football club. And I know full well there are fans out there that don't give a shit about how much we spend or how much we save because we're not accountants and we don't care. But there's a byproduct to what you spend. Just look at Jack Grealish. If we spent 50 million on Jack Grealish, no one would be talking about him in such horrible terms to the criticism that he gets. Nowadays, it's always associated with the £100 million. Always. That comes with buying a player for that price. If you sign Joshua Kimmich for free, all of a sudden it's bargain of the century. How much do we brag about Akanji's price? I do. And I think most logical, level-headed City fans brag about it because what a player Akanji is for 15 million. Absolute joke. 55 million for Erling Haaland. That's one of the greatest things you can brag about is saying that because we're known as that club that's have all this money and in the mental side of Manchester City for rival fans is that we splash the cash everywhere when we don't. We're very pragmatic. And we're very calculated in the way we do our spending. And Haaland and Akanji are prime examples of that. And the list will go on, by the way. And I want to keep this video short for how many players that we've got an absolute bargain for. But then you only need to look at how many... One player in particular sticks out. And City don't want to get burnt again. In sticking with this position of Rodri is Calvin Phillips. Finished for me. He was finished a while ago. He was finished when he made his West Ham debut. Because he made the same mistake against AC Milan. He played the game against AC Milan, and I mean, it was embarrassing. I've been saying it for years. The guy can't receive the ball facing the goalkeeper. We're facing Edison or Ortega. He can't receive the ball. It's like turning a ship liner. You know what I mean? It's like turning a cargo ship. It takes so long for Calvin Phillips to turn around. By the time he does, someone's picked his pocket. It's a huge weakness in his game and a massive mistake from Manchester City to have not spotted that in the scouting process when trying to buy Calvin Phillips. So we could go out there and spend 40 million like we did on Calvin Phillips, and there's a mistake that Manchester City have made. Few and far between, mind you, because we often get it right more often than not. 9 times out of 10, I would say, transfer-wise, City get it right. That was 1 out of 10 for me, Calvin Phillips, and it was a big, big mistake. £40 million if we go and spend on a similar player in that same ilk. You know, there are players out there, Wharton, for example, we could look at, for example, but you'd have to pay top money, more probably closer to double for Adam Wharton of Crystal Palace. So for me, it's either go for Joshua Kimmich now in this market and spend 30, 40, maybe even 50 million euros. It depends on how, if Bayern Munich want to play hardball. I think 50 is too much for me. But considering the length of his contract, at least 40 million, and you could get him for free in a year. That's the one for me. Bruno Gimes as a player, I would love to have him at Manchester City, but business-wise, it ain't going to happen. From both ends of the transaction, Newcastle's end and Manchester City's end, the player's not going to force a move either way. Ain't going to happen. Alternatively, we get nobody. And this brings me back to the point I made at the beginning, and I think the over-panic from City fans that I get the point, though. I agree with City fans to an extent that, yes, there is an over-dependency on Rodri. We are pushing our luck with Rodri and having him playing so many minutes over the course of the season and knowing full well that it doesn't take a genius to work out that we saw last season 3 games without Rodri while he was suspended. Rodri made that huge mistake and he will have learnt from that. Manchester City, though, have they identified that Rodri's importance needs cover, or does Pep just trust the players that he has already? Okay, so, I mean, hypothetically, we could look at a situation where Rodri doesn't get injured at all. And we have the same Rodri that lasts the duration of the season and we do okay. There could be that scenario. And I think that as close as we got to winning the FA Cup last season, we won the Premier League last season and we got knocked out by the eventual winners. We weren't that far away from getting back-to-back trebles. I mean, we did get a treble last season with the UEFA Super Cup and the Club World Cup as well. Premier League on top of that. Not the treble, though. Those are the standards that we're setting now. We're astronomical standards to expect City to go and get another treble. But why not? Why not? You know, we should shoot for those heights. Now, right, this team that is on your screen right now would be my favourite team to start the season. I know immediately you're looking at the right wing and thinking, well, where's Savio? We've just signed Savio. Because we have just signed Savio, I don't know exactly what we're going to get from him in a Manchester City shirt. I've seen enough of him in a Girona shirt and studied the life of him, and what a player he looks like. So Savio, for me, I'm excited to see him. Bernardo Silva, for me, though, you can't not have him in a team right now. So if I was going to put Savio in, I'd probably put him in ahead of Jeremy Doku, going off the current knowledge that we have of these players. You know, I know a lot. This ain't FIFA. We're not playing FIFA here. This is Premier League football. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You go with the proven. You're not bored in your bedroom and you fancy making some changes because you're sick of seeing the same players on your screen in front of you while you're playing FIFA. This is Premier League football. You go with the proven. You know, Savio is fantastic and I'm excited about Savio. But Bernardo Silva is a proven Premier League winner, Champions League talent, next level quality Bernardo Silva. One of the best players in the Premier League that we've ever seen in a Manchester City shirt, Bernardo Silva. So the idea to not play him and just throw Savio in because it's exciting and it's new isn't very logical. I could see it happening further into the season once we get to see Savio. Maybe you could see Bernardo Silva cutting inside, at least covering for the likes of De Bruyne and Foden. Bernardo Silva fits the bill for me in that regard as well. That versatility that he offers. But this is all about Rodri. So the debate for Rodri comes into question whether it's cover for Rodri, someone playing alongside Rodri, or cover in the absence of Rodri. And then that has a caveat. Are you playing a single pivot or are you playing a double pivot? Because quite often we've seen Kovacic pushing forward this season and getting more into that number 8, the shirt number that he actually wears, and playing in the spaces in attacking midfield quite a bit and having that number 8 role. But let's say, hypothetically, you move Rodri out this team. For me, John Stones is the next best thing that we've got in our squad that can fit the bill for Rodri. Going off again, proven, going over the course of the season, when we won the treble in the 22-23 season. But you have to factor in, when Stones looked at his best, he played alongside Rodri. So we have to ask the question, can Stones do it without Rodri? That's a debate for me. I don't know. Can he be as good as he looked in that 22-23 season without Rodri alongside him? Because he's taking the mantle of Rodri in this role, the physical, ball-playing, unstoppable force in midfield that Rodri is. And Kovacic is complementing him with his control and his technical ability and his ability to push forward and an eye for a cute pass. That's Kovacic. He's a controlling player. Playing him aside John Stones, he's an enforcer. You know, he's someone who breaks up the play and plays it simple. And he's just a super solid player, John Stones. But is he without Rodri? I feel like we have to experiment with that. And I feel like that's the what Pep would go for. Alternatively, last season, you could effectively swap these two, really, and play John Stones at right centre-back and push Akanji in there. Last season, against Aston Villa, we played both of them in that role. That would therefore mean Kyle Walker has to come in, which I know I can hear you already screaming, those anti-Kyle Walker fans out there, like, oh no, he's put Kyle Walker in, oh God, how bad am I? Oh God. Get over it, mate. Kyle Walker's a good defender. I don't want to see him going forward this season, by the way, Kyle Walker. I don't want to see that. And I think the signing of Savio, it hopefully prevents that from happening, or Doku coming over to the right. We don't have to depend on Kyle Walker crossing the ball, getting forward into positions, but those were instructions from Pep Guardiola, don't forget that. Kyle Walker in a defensive situation, I'm happy. I'm okay, I trust him defensively. But John Stones and Akanji in midfield has absolutely no control. We played this against Aston Villa away. We actually played Rico Lewis in the attacking midfielder role, where Kevin De Bruyne is effectively here, and put Rico Lewis ahead of them. We got battered by Aston Villa away. It was a 1-0 massacre, if there is such a thing. 22 shots we conceded on our goal from Aston Villa. We created 2 in this game. 2. So there is no creativity in that midfield, especially if you remove Phil Foden and Kevin De Bruyne and put Rico Lewis in there. But then you could put Rico Lewis in alongside John Stones for me. Again, it's an option. You could put Matheus Nunes in there alongside John Stones, potentially. Could we see a Kovacic and Matheus Nunes in midfield? That lacks that ability to enforce midfield, to break up play. There's no defensive mindset in that midfield all of a sudden. So it's really, really difficult. And we've got options. We have got options. I think for me, John Stones is the cover for Rodri. I think he's the closest thing to it. I think Akanji is close behind. Technical ability, what we saw from John Stones was brilliant in the Euros. We know what we've seen in the 22-23 season. Last season, I think a lot of people were surprised at how good Akanji actually is on the ball, playing in that midfield role. He showed that in a Switzerland shirt as well in the Euros. Absolutely sensational from Akanji in that in a defensive role, but his ability to play with the ball is absolutely fantastic. So I feel like they cover for Rodri, but when you don't have Rodri alongside either Akanji or John Stones, can they play like Rodri? Can they fill that void? No one in the world can. But it's how low will the bar be dropped when Rodri's not in that team? How far away from the standards will the players get to when Rodri's not in that team? And playing the likes of Kovacic alongside a John Stones or a Akanji, have we got the defensive nous to break up play? Have we got the defensive nous to avoid counter-attacks? Can we offer a counter-press should we lose the ball in the final third of the opposition pitch? All this level of thinking that he's got it down to a T. He knows exactly what he's doing. Hypothetically, we may not lose Rodri. We may get away with it. I feel like that's what Pep's kind of hoping for, that we go through next season and keep Rodri for the majority of the season, maybe losing for a game or two, worst case scenario. But I mean, if we lose Rodri, big injury, something like that, it's on the cards because we are pushing him. If we lose him for 2 or 3 months, you can almost write our season off if we haven't signed someone to replace him, because there is no cover for Rodri in the squad that we currently have. But it's a hypothetical situation that I don't think you can enter a season with too much thinking like that. You have to plan for worst case scenarios. But who do you sign that is a player out there that is quite happy to accept being Rodri's cover, to be as almost as good as Rodri. If you're almost as good as Rodri, you're going to say, I want to start every week. I don't want to just be on the bench and when you need me, when Rodri's not fit or suspended, then you call upon me. There's no player in the world, that doesn't exist. The closest player to me out there that was of that similar quality was João Neves. And he's already proven that in my head, I thought because he's young, maybe you could persuade him to be an understudy for a year or two, knowing how young he is. And then you could bed him in slowly. And because of his youth and because of his age, he could be persuaded to sit on the bench for once in a while, knowing that Rodri's ahead of him. Even he said, no, I don't want that. Clearly, he's gone to PSG because he'll get more minutes. City were in the race for João Neves. We were interested in him, but we could not promise him the minutes that PSG could promise him. Who in defensive midfield can we promise the minutes to, knowing full well that Rodri is going to take those minutes, the majority of them, throughout the course of the season, and they have to accept being on the bench, yet they are still good enough to come on and be of similar or close to standards that Rodri sets? They don't exist. It's a really, really difficult conundrum for Manchester City, and I think we have to accept that certain players in the current squad are going to be used in a versatile approach, the John Stones and the Kanji, and I think that's going to be the cover for Manchester City going forward, unless City pull one out of the bag and suddenly explode into action in the transfer market and go for a Bruno Gimes. I can't see that deal happening. Just both ends don't make sense. Joshua Kimmich is the only one for me that seems like there's some logic to it. Business logic, financial logic, contractual logic. For me, it's Kimmich. Other than that, it's what we've got. What do you think, Blues? Get in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Like and subscribe to Typical City, and I'll see you in the next one.
This is Typical City now, holding up silver.